The shrill beep of the oven timer sliced through the silence of the house like a serrated knife. It was the only sound in the entire place. No holiday music, no laughter, just that relentless mechanical chirping echoing off the cold granite countertops. I stared at the turkey, its skin roasted to a perfect golden brown, the culmination of 6 hours of labor, and I felt absolutely nothing. My hands were shaking, not from the weight of the roasting pan, but from the sudden, suffocating realization that the silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy. It was the sound of a life imploding, the air pressure dropping right before the tornado hits. I didn't know it yet, but the storm had already made landfall in the hallway. On Christmas Eve, at the age of 62, my husband left me for a 29-year-old woman. Sitting alone on a frozen bench in Lincoln Park, shivering under the biting Chicago snow, I saw a young man without a jacket. He was pale, his jaw trembling violently against the wind. I took off my own coat and gave it to him. 3 hours later, a convoy of black SUVs pulled up in front of me. The boy stepped out of one of the vehicles and simply said, "What a relief to find you here, ma'am." But before we continue, make sure you are subscribed to the channel and write in the comments, where are you watching this video from? We love knowing how far our stories are traveling. My name is Sophia. I am 62 years old, and I thought I knew every shape and shadow of pain a woman could feel. I lost my mother young. I raised 3 children practically on my own while working double shifts as a secretary. I survived 2 major surgeries in the last 5 years. But nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me to hear the words Richard said to me on the night of December 24th, 2024. It was 7 in the evening when he walked through the front door of our house in the suburbs. I was in the kitchen finishing the Christmas dinner, the same one I had prepared for 40 years in a row. The smell of roast turkey and sage stuffing filled the entire house. The table was already set with the red tablecloth I inherited from my grandmother. The white candles were lit. The fine china we kept for special occasions was laid out. Richard stopped in the kitchen doorway, still wearing his beige wool coat. He didn't take off his shoes, which was something he always did. That should have been my first sign that something was wrong. 40 years of marriage teach you the small rituals, the silent routines that define a shared life. When those routines break, the foundation is usually cracking too. "Sophia, we need to talk." He said it, and his voice sounded distant, as if he were speaking from behind thick glass. I dried my hands on the embroidered apron, the one my oldest daughter gave me on Mother's Day. "Of course, honey. Sit down right there. I'll pour you some coffee. You must be tired from the traffic." "I don't want coffee." He ran a hand through his graying hair, a gesture he only made when he was nervous. "I want you to listen to what I have to say." Something in his tone made my stomach turn. I leaned against the counter near the sink, feeling my legs go weak. At 62, my body wasn't what it used to be. My joints ached with the cold. My blood pressure was always a little off, and I had that constant feeling of tiredness that comes with age. "I can't keep pretending anymore," Richard continued, staring at the ceramic floor we had picked out together 10 years ago. "I haven't been happy for a long time, Sophia. A very long time." I felt as if the floor were opening up beneath my feet. "What are you talking about? We're fine. We've been together 40 years, Richard. 40 years. "That is exactly why." He finally looked me in the eyes, and what I saw there split me in half. It wasn't anger. It wasn't contempt. It was indifference, pure and simple indifference. 40 years doing the same thing, having the same conversations, living the same routine. "I feel trapped, Sophia. I feel old." "We are old," I said, my voice coming out sharper than usual. "We are over 60, Richard. It's natural for things to be this way. But I don't want to feel this way." He took off his coat with jerky movements and threw it onto a chair. "I met someone who makes me feel young again, who makes me want to wake up in the morning." The words left his mouth like bullets, each one hitting a vital organ. "You met someone," I repeated mechanically. My brain refused to process the full meaning of those words. "Her name is Jessica. She works at the diner where I have lunch near the office. She is 29 years old and—" He paused as if searching for the right words. She sees me in a way you haven't seen me in years. 29 years old, the same age as my youngest daughter. I felt bile rise in my throat. How long? I managed to ask. 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of my life lived inside a complete lie. I thought about all the times I kissed Richard in the last 6 months, all the meals I prepared, all the nights I slept beside him, believing we were okay. It was all fake. And you come to tell me this on Christmas Eve? My voice trembled. On Christmas Eve, Richard? She gave me an ultimatum, he said, and he had the audacity to look uncomfortable. She said she wasn't going to spend another New Year's alone waiting for me. She said it was time for me to decide what I really wanted. And you decided? I concluded. It wasn't a question. I already moved my things to her apartment, most of it at least. I just came for the rest and to let you know. I looked at that man with whom I shared 4 decades of my life, the man who asked me to marry him under a summer rain, who stood by my side when our children were born, who cried with me when we buried our parents, and I recognized nothing of him. The house, I started. You keep it, he interrupted quickly. I don't want to fight over anything. I just want to move on. Move on. As if 40 years could be erased with those 2 simple words. The boys, I tried again, thinking of our 3 children, Jason, Andrew, and Paula. I'll talk to them after the holidays. I didn't want to ruin their Christmas, but it was fine to ruin mine, apparently. Richard grabbed his coat and went toward the bedroom. I heard him opening closets, dragging suitcases, sounds that filled the silence of the house, which suddenly seemed enormous and empty. I stood frozen in the kitchen, surrounded by preparations for a Christmas dinner that would never happen, feeling like a statue of salt. 15 minutes later, he passed through the kitchen carrying 2 large suitcases. Sophia, I'm very sorry, truly. I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat was closed shut. My eyes burned. But the tears refused to fall. It was as if my body was in shock, incapable of processing the magnitude of what was happening. The front door closed with a soft click. And just like that, after 40 years, my marriage ended. No screaming, no broken plates, no drama. Just a man walking out the door with his suitcases, leaving behind a 62-year-old woman and a lifetime of memories. I stood there, I don't know for how long. The oven timer beeped, startling me. The turkey was ready. I turned off the oven mechanically and stared at the set table. The food I had prepared with so much love. The Christmas decorations I had placed all over the house last week. It all seemed like a cruel farce. I took off my apron and let it fall to the floor. I grabbed my thickest winter coat from the hall closet, the brown wool one that Richard always said made me look old. I wrapped my knitted scarf around my neck and stepped out into the cold night. The snow had started falling heavily. The streets were covered by a white blanket that silenced all sounds. The houses around were lit up, windows glowing with Christmas lights, shadows of families moving inside, happy and together. I had nowhere to go. Our children lived in other cities, celebrating Christmas with their in-laws. My few friends were all busy with their own celebrations, and I couldn't bear the idea of calling anyone and having to explain what had happened, having to say out loud that my husband left me on Christmas Eve for a waitress 40 years younger. So I simply walked. The snow soaked my shoes. The cold penetrated through my thick coat, but I kept walking. I needed to move. I needed to feel something other than the hollow pain that had settled in my chest. I ended up in Lincoln Park, the one where Richard and I used to take the boys to play when they were little. There was a bench near the gazebo, partially protected by the wooden structure. I brushed the snow off the seat with my gloved hand and sat down. The cold metal seeped through my wool trousers. I shivered violently. It was so cold, so unbearably cold. But I couldn't move. I couldn't go back to that empty house full of memories of a life that no longer existed. I looked up at the dark sky, at the snowflakes falling incessantly. Somewhere, church bells rang, marking 8 o'clock. Midnight mass services were starting soon. Families were gathering around tables. Children were opening presents. And I was alone on a frozen bench with my life destroyed. I don't know how long I sat on that bench. The cold had already penetrated to my bones, and I could barely feel my feet inside my soaked shoes. My hands, even inside the wool gloves, were numb, but the physical pain was almost a relief. At least it made me feel something concrete, something other than the void that threatened to swallow me whole. The park was practically deserted. No one in their right mind would be outside in this weather. The few people passing by ran hurriedly to their warm homes, to their families, to their intact lives. No one looked at the older woman sitting alone on the bench. I was invisible, just as I had always been. For 40 years I defined myself as Richard's wife, mother of Jason, Andrew, and Paula. My identity was intertwined with those people, with those roles I played. I never stopped to think about who Sophia was, the woman behind those titles. And now, sitting in that snow, I realized I didn't have the slightest idea. Who was I without Richard? What did I like to do, besides cooking his favorite meals and keeping the house how he preferred it? When was the last time I chose to watch a movie I wanted, instead of giving in to the war documentaries he loved? When was the last time I did something just because it gave me pleasure? I couldn't remember. I was so lost in those thoughts that I almost didn't notice the figure approaching. It was only when I heard irregular footsteps in the snow that I lifted my head. A young man was walking down the main path of the park, his steps slow and cautious. As he got closer, I could see his features better in the dim light of the street lamps. He must have been about 25, maybe 30, tall, thin, with dark hair and unshaven stubble. He was wearing old jeans and a long-sleeved shirt that was far too thin for this weather. No jacket, no gloves, no scarf. He was shivering violently. My maternal instinct, the one 40 years of caring for others, had sharpened into a second nature, activated immediately. I forgot my own pain, my own situation. All I saw was a young man freezing in the snow. "Young man!" I called out, my voice coming out hoarse from the cold. "Young man, are you okay?" He stopped and looked in my direction, seeming surprised to see anyone there. His eyes were dark, intense, even in the gloom. "I'm looking for a place to get warm," he said. "The shelters are full. They always fill up at Christmas. Everyone wants to feel good about helping the poor during the holidays." "You know?" There was bitterness in his voice, but also resignation, as if he were used to disappointment. I stood up from the bench with difficulty, my joints protesting after being still so long in the cold. "You're going to freeze in those clothes. Where is your jacket?" He shrugged, a gesture that made him shiver even more. "I don't have one. I lost my job 3 months ago, lost my apartment shortly after. My stuff got stolen at the shelter. Now I only have what I'm wearing." I looked at him more closely. Despite the beard and worn clothes, there was something about him that didn't fit the image of a homeless person. His way of speaking was articulate, polite. His hands, though dirty, didn't look like the hands of someone who had spent years on the streets. But that didn't matter. What mattered was that he was freezing, and I had a heavy coat that could save him. Without thinking much, I started taking off my brown wool coat. "Here," I said, holding it out to him, "put this on." He looked at me as if I had gone crazy. "Ma'am, you're going to freeze. I can't accept it." "I have more clothes underneath," I lied. I was wearing only a thin wool blouse under the coat. "And I'm not going to stay out here much longer. You, on the other hand, are going to spend the night looking for shelter. You need it more than I do." That was true. Despite everything, I still had a house to go back to. This boy had nothing. "Please," I insisted when he hesitated, "let me do this. It's Christmas. Let me do something good today." Something in my voice must have convinced him. He took the coat with trembling hands and put it on quickly. It was too big for him, but it would work. I saw the instant relief on his face when the warmth of the wool enveloped him. "I don't know what to say," he murmured. "You don't even know me. Why would you do this?" "Because someone needs help," I answered simply. "And because today I learned that the worst things can happen without warning. If I can stop something bad from happening to you, I'm going to do it." The cold hit me with full force as soon as the coat left my shoulders. The wind cut through my thin blouse like knives of ice. I started shivering immediately, but I didn't regret it. That young man needed it more than I did. He studied me for a long moment, his dark eyes evaluating me. "My name is Matt," he said finally. "And you just saved my life, literally." "Sophia," I replied, "and you're exaggerating. It's just a coat." "It's not just a coat." He put his hands in the pockets, clearly appreciating the warmth. "It's the first act of genuine kindness I've received since I lost everything. Most people look at me as if I were invisible. Or worse, as if I were dangerous." I knew that feeling of invisibility well. At 62, I had become invisible to my own husband. "What brought you here?" I asked, hugging my own body in a vain attempt to warm up. "To this park, I mean." "I used to come here when I was a kid," Matt said, looking around. "My parents brought me to play. Good times." His voice became distant. "They died 5 years ago. Car accident. After that, things fell apart. I fell apart." "I am so sorry," I said sincerely. "And you?" he asked. "What brings you to a frozen bench on Christmas Eve?" I hesitated. I didn't know this boy. I didn't know him anything. But maybe that was exactly why the words came out. "My husband left me today. 40 years of marriage, and he left me for a waitress who makes him feel young again." My voice cracked on the last word. "He left the house 2 hours ago, and I couldn't stay there. I couldn't stay surrounded by everything we built together." Matt nodded slowly, as if he understood perfectly. "Funny how life works, isn't it? You have a house, but can't stay in it. I would give anything for a house, but I don't have one. We both ended up on this frozen bench, wanting different things." He was right. It was ironically poetic. "Can I tell you something, Sophia?" he continued. "A man who abandons 40 years of marriage for someone younger is an idiot. He might think he's looking for youth, but what he's really doing is running from himself. And you don't run from yourself by changing partners. You just take your problems to a new address." The words were surprisingly mature for someone so young. "You are wise for your age," I observed. "Living on the streets teaches you a lot about human nature," he said with a sad smile. "Seeing people at their worst and, occasionally, at their best. Like you today." The cold was becoming unbearable now. My teeth were chattering uncontrollably, and I could barely feel my fingers. Matt noticed. "You need to go home," he said firmly. "You've been out here too long. You're going to get sick." "And you?" I asked. "Where are you going?" "I'm going to find a place." He touched the coat with reverence. "Thanks to this, I have a better chance now. There's a diner a few blocks from here that stays open all night. I can stay there until dawn." I took off my scarf, the only warm thing I still had left, and I held it out to him. "Take this too, please." "Sophia." "Take it," I insisted. He took the scarf, his eyes shining with unshed emotion. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to." I tried to smile, though my face was too numb to know if I managed it. "Just take care of yourself, okay? And when things get better, and they will get better, pass it on." Matt nodded, wrapping the scarf around his neck. "I will always remember you, Sophia." The woman who gave her coat to a stranger on the coldest night of the year, even when she was going through the worst night of her life. He took a few steps away, then he stopped and turned back. "Sophia? That man is an idiot." "I hope you realize that." Before I could answer, he gave me a nod and walked away into the snow, his figure becoming smaller and smaller until he disappeared completely into the darkness. I was left alone again, now without a coat, without a scarf, shivering violently in the cold. But for the first time on that terrible night, I felt something other than pain. I felt purpose. I had made a difference in someone's life. I had mattered. The walk back home was torture. Without the coat, the cold penetrated through my thin blouse in seconds. Every step was a fight against the cutting wind that seemed determined to knock me down. My soaked shoes slipped on the snow, making every movement dangerous. At 62, a fall could mean months of recovery. But I kept going, putting one foot in front of the other, focusing only on the next step. I didn't think about Richard. I didn't think about the empty house waiting for me. I didn't think about how my life had crumbled in a matter of hours. I thought only about getting home, about warmth, about surviving that night. When I finally opened the front door, the temperature difference was so shocking I almost fell. The house was warm, The Christmas lights still twinkled cheerfully in the living room, and the smell of turkey still floated in the air. It looked like a house where happy people lived. It was a cruel lie. I went straight to the bathroom, peeling off my wet clothes with numb fingers that barely obeyed my commands. I got into the shower and let the hot water thaw my body, slowly. The pain when sensation returned to my fingers and feet was intense, but welcome. It meant I hadn't suffered serious frostbite. I stayed in the shower until the water started to run cold. Then I wrapped myself in the softest robe I had and went to the kitchen. The dinner was still there, untouched. The wilted salad I had prepared hours ago when I still believed I would have a normal Christmas. I looked at that food for a long moment. It represented hours of work, decades of tradition, and all for nothing. Richard was somewhere with his 29-year-old Jessica, probably eating something fancy in an expensive restaurant, proving to himself that he was still young and desirable. I ate stuffing directly from the bowl, standing in the empty kitchen. It tasted like nothing. It could have been sawdust, and I wouldn't have noticed the difference. I ended up throwing it all away. Every platter, every carefully prepared dish, everything went into the trash. Then I cleared the table, put away my grandmother's tablecloth, blew out the candles. I took down all the Christmas decorations in the living room and packed them away. I wanted to erase every trace of that Christmas that never happened. It was almost midnight when I finally dragged myself to bed. The bed I shared with Richard for 40 years. His side still had the indentation where he had slept the night before. His pillow still smelled like him. I hugged that pillow and finally, let the tears fall. I cried not just for Richard, but for the life we built, the future we planned, the person I thought I was. I cried for the 62-year-old woman I was, discarded like an old piece of furniture that no longer fit the decor. I cried for the loneliness that stretched out before me, endless and terrifying. And at some point in the middle of that crying, I fell asleep, exhausted. For the next few days, I ignored my children's calls. I couldn't pretend everything was fine, but I wasn't ready to tell the truth either. So I simply didn't answer, sending texts saying I had a bad flu and didn't want to infect the grandkids. I spent the whole day in pajamas, watching television programs without really seeing anything. The house felt strange without Richard. Every room held memories that now seemed contaminated by betrayal. On the 26th, I forced myself to eat something other than toast. I made scrambled eggs that I could barely swallow. I took a shower. I changed pajamas. Small victories that seemed monumental. On the 27th, I finally answered when my daughter Paula texted me. "Still sick?" I opened my mouth to lie, to say yes, that I was feeling better. "Thanks for asking." But the words that came out were different. "Your father left me, Paula." Silence on the other end of the line. "What?" And then it all came out. I told her about Christmas Eve, about Jessica, about the 40 years. Paula listened, mostly just making small sounds of confirmation to show she was there. When I finished, she was crying. "Mom, I am so sorry. I am so sorry. I'm taking the first flight out there." "You shouldn't be alone." "No," I said firmly. "You have your family, your children." "I don't want to ruin my grandkids' break." "I'm fine, Paula, or I will be. I just need time." We talked a little more. She made me promise I would call every day, that I would eat well, that I wouldn't just stay lying in bed. I promised, even knowing I would probably break those promises. Then I called my sons too. Jason was furious, and Andrew offered to come visit. Both got the same answer. "Stay with your families. I'll be fine." But the truth was, I didn't know if I was going to be fine. I had no idea how to move forward from there. It was December 28th, 3 days after that terrible night, when my life changed again. I was in the living room trying to find the energy to clean when I heard the sound of engines outside. Not just one car engine, but many, all arriving at the same time. I went to the window and peeked through the curtains. My quiet residential street was being taken over by a fleet of luxury cars. Black SUVs, all identical, all expensive. There were at least 8, maybe 10 vehicles lining up perfectly along the curb. My first thought was that it must be some mistake. Maybe they were looking for someone else's house. My second thought was worry. Had something happened to one of my children? Were these police coming to deliver bad news? Then the doors started opening. Men in black suits stepped out of every vehicle, moving with military precision. But they weren't aggressive. They stood by the doors, waiting. Then, from one of the middle cars, Matt stepped out. But it wasn't the Matt I had met. That Matt was wearing dirty jeans and a thin shirt, shivering from the cold. This Matt was wearing an impeccable suit that probably cost more than my car. His hair was styled, his beard trimmed to perfection. I stood paralyzed. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. Was it really Matt? The homeless young man to whom I had given my coat 3 nights ago? What was happening? The doorbell rang. With trembling hands, I went to the door and opened it a crack. "Sophia," Matt said, and his smile was warm, genuine. "It's incredible to see you again." I don't understand. What is all this?" I pointed to the cars, to the men in suits. "Can I come in?" he asked gently. "I have a lot to explain." I opened the door wider, suddenly painfully aware that I was still in pajamas, without makeup, with unbrushed hair. But Matt didn't seem to notice or care. He walked in, looking around the house with genuine interest. I closed the door behind him. "Are you going to explain to me what's going on? Why are there 10 SUVs on my street? Who are those people?" Matt took a deep breath. "My full name is Matthew Randall. I am the CEO of Randall Enterprises." The name was familiar. Randall Enterprises was a massive corporation. They appeared in the news frequently, involved in huge urban projects in Chicago and beyond. I must have stared at him with my mouth open because Matt smiled gently and said, "Maybe you should sit down." I let myself fall onto the sofa, still trying to process. Matthew Randall, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar company. And I had seen him shivering in worn clothes with nowhere to sleep. "I don't understand," I managed to say finally. "You said you were homeless, that you had lost everything." "I lied," he said simply, sitting in the armchair opposite me. "Well, not exactly. The part about my parents dying was true, and things really did fall apart after that, just not in the financial sense. When my parents died, I inherited their company. I was 23, inexperienced, but I tried to make it work. For 2 years, I dedicated myself completely. I built Randall Enterprises into something 3 times bigger than my father ever imagined. But in the process, I surrounded myself with the wrong people. People who saw only my money, my position. I had friends who only called when they needed bills paid. I had relationships with women who were more interested in my bank account than in me." His voice became lower, sadder. 6 months ago, I discovered my fiancé was having an affair with my best friend, or the man I thought was my best friend. They were planning to get married after she got me to sign a prenup that would have given her millions. The betrayal was a pain I knew too well. I canceled everything, obviously, broke the engagement, cut ties with him. But that left me in a sort of existential crisis. I started questioning everything and everyone around me. Did anyone actually care? Or was it all about the money? He stood up and started pacing the living room. So I decided to run a test. I decided to disguise myself as someone who had nothing and see how people would treat me. I spent the last 3 months doing this periodically, dressing in old clothes, walking through different parts of the city, observing how people react to someone they think has nothing to offer. "And what did you discover?" I asked, already imagining the answer. "That most people don't see you if you can't do something for them," he said. "The vast majority ignored me completely. Some were actively cruel. Some threw coins, as if I were a beggar, without even looking at my face." He stopped and looked directly at me. "But you were different, Sophia. You were clearly going through the worst moment of your life. Anyone would have understood if you had simply walked on, focused on your own pain. But you saw someone in need and immediately acted to help." "It was just a coat and a scarf," I murmured. "It wasn't just anything," Matt said firmly. "You literally took the clothes off your back to give them to a stranger. Without asking questions, without judging, without expecting anything in return. You were freezing, but you worried more about me." He signaled to one of the men outside, who came running with a garment bag. Matt unzipped it and pulled out my brown coat, clean, pressed, and looking new. "I had it restored," he said, handing it to me. "But Sophia, I didn't come here just to return your coat. I came to make you a proposal." I took the coat, feeling the familiar fabric between my fingers. I was confused, emotional, and completely lost. Matt sat down again, his posture becoming more formal, more professional. Randall Enterprises has a philanthropic arm, the Randall Foundation. We donate close to $80 million a year to various causes: affordable housing, educational programs, community centers. Currently, the foundation is managed by people with degrees in business and finance. They read articles and reports, but they have never really seen the reality of the people we are trying to help. He looked at me with intensity. I need someone who understands what it is to really need help, someone who has genuine compassion, someone who sees people, not numbers. And in the last 3 months of doing this experiment, you are the first person who demonstrated the kind of character I'm looking for. My heart sped up. What are you proposing exactly? I want you to work as the Director of Community Relations for the Randall Foundation. It would be your responsibility to ensure that our programs actually meet the needs of the communities. You would visit projects, talk to beneficiaries, help us understand where we can make a real difference. He cited a salary that made my jaw drop. It was more than Richard and I earned together in our best years. "Matt, I don't have experience in that area. I was a secretary all my life. How can I manage programs worth millions of dollars?" "You would learn, and you wouldn't be alone. We have an entire team of professionals who handle the technical aspects. What we need is the heart." I looked at my hands, the wrinkles that marked every year of my 62 years. "Why me, Matt? You must have met other good people during your tests." "I met people who threw coins, people who said good luck and walked on. One woman bought me a sandwich. Those were kind gestures, yes, but you gave me something that cost you. You were freezing, but you cared more about me. That isn't just kindness, Sophia. That is sacrifice. And that is exactly the kind of person I want leading our philanthropic efforts." "I don't know," I hesitated. "It's a lot of responsibility." "What if I fail? Then we adjust the course and try again." "But Sophia, that night you told me your husband left you for someone younger. That made you feel discarded, worthless." I nodded, feeling the familiar pain squeeze my chest. "That man was a blind idiot," Matt said with conviction. "Because looking at you now, I see someone with decades of wisdom, of compassion, of strength. I see someone who chooses to help even when she is suffering. You are extraordinary." Tears began to run down my face. It had been so long since anyone saw me that way. It had been so long since I saw myself that way. "You don't have to decide now," Matt continued gently. "Think about it. But Sophia, even if you say no, I want you to know that that night changed something in me. It restored my faith. That there are still people who do the right thing simply because it is the right thing." I wiped the tears with the back of my hand. "Can I ask one thing?" "Anything." "Why did you keep doing that test? You had already discovered that most people are selfish. What were you still looking for?" Matt was silent for a moment. "A reason to believe it was worth continuing. Worth building, donating, trying to make a difference. After my fiancé's betrayal, I was starting to think people were fundamentally selfish. That everything was transactional." He looked at me again. "But you proved I was wrong." And that was it. 2 wounded people who found each other in the worst moment of their lives and somehow helped one another start to heal. "How long do I have to think?" I asked finally. "As long as you need." Matt pulled a business card from his pocket and put it on the coffee table. "I genuinely hope you say yes. I think we could do incredible work together." He stood up, and I walked him to the door. At the door, he stopped and turned. "That coat saved me that night, not physically. I have drivers and security guards who would have picked me up if I called. But you saved me in a different way. You saved me from losing faith in people. Thank you for that, Sophia. And please, think about my proposal. The world needs more people like you." After he left and the SUVs disappeared down the street, I stood in the doorway for a long time, holding the business card and my restored coat. My life had been destroyed just 3 days ago. I felt old, discarded, without purpose. And now, suddenly, someone was telling me I was extraordinary. It was terrifying, it was exciting, it was completely unexpected. I spent the next 3 days on an emotional roller coaster. 1 hour I was convinced I should accept Matt's proposal. The next hour I was sure it would be a complete disaster. At 62, with no experience, what did I know about managing multi-million-dollar philanthropic programs? But then I remembered the feeling of that night in the park. How, for a few minutes, I had forgotten my own pain completely to help someone. How that gave me a purpose, even if temporary. And I thought about Matt, a man who had it all but felt empty, desperately looking for something real in a world of fakes. We were both broken in different ways, and we offered each other hope. On the third day, I was looking out the kitchen window, watching the snow that had finally stopped falling, when my phone rang. It was Richard. My first instinct was to ignore it, but something made me answer. "Sophia." His voice sounded tired. "Can we talk?" "About what, Richard? I think you already said everything." "Please, just 10 minutes. "Fine," I said, "but not here. I don't want you in my house." We agreed to meet at a coffee shop downtown, neutral and public. When I arrived there an hour later, he was already waiting with 2 cups of coffee at the table. Richard looked awful. He had deep bags under his eyes, his beard wasn't shaved, and his clothes were wrinkled. He wasn't the confident man who had left the house. "I wasn't sure if you would come," he said. "I almost didn't," I answered honestly. "What do you want, Richard?" He stirred his coffee, avoiding my gaze. I made a mistake, a terrible mistake. Something in me hardened. "Really? When exactly did you realize that?" "When Jessica started asking for expensive things, when you realized a 29-year-old girl is exhausting for a 65-year-old man?" "It wasn't like that," he murmured. "Then how was it?" He finally looked at me, and I saw shame in his eyes. "She broke up with me 2 days after Christmas. She said I was old and boring, that she thought it would be more fun, but I just complained about my back and wanted to go to bed early." I should have felt satisfaction, but all I felt was a deep sadness. "And now you want to come back," I concluded. "Now that your fantasy of youth blew up in your face, you want to come back to the reliable, predictable wife." "It's not like that." "It is exactly like that, Richard." My voice was calm, but firm. "You discarded me like an old garment that didn't fit anymore, and now that you found out the new clothes are uncomfortable, you want to dig me out of the trash." 40 years cannot be thrown in the trash just like that," he pleaded. "You threw them," I said dryly. "You made that decision. On Christmas Eve, no less. You destroyed our life together because you wanted to feel young." I picked up my coffee and took a sip, noticing Richard had remembered how I liked it, with milk and a little sugar, 40 years of habit. "But you know," I continued, "I realized you are right about one thing. I was trapped in a routine, in a life that didn't challenge me anymore, but not because I was old or boring, because I had stopped growing. I became just your wife, just the mother of our children. I forgot to be Sophia." "Exactly," Richard perked up, as if I were agreeing with him. "We can find that again, together." I interrupted him. "You didn't understand. I don't want to go back to what we were. I don't want that life anymore." His expression changed to confusion. "What do you mean?" I thought about Matt's card in my purse, about the proposal that seemed simultaneously impossible and perfect, about the chance to be something more than just someone's discarded wife. "I was offered a job," I said, "something I never imagined doing." Richard frowned. "What kind of job?" "That doesn't matter. What matters is that someone saw value in me. Someone believes I can make a difference in the world, not as your wife or as the mother of our children, as Sophia, as myself. Sophia, be realistic. You are 62. Who would give you a job that fulfills you?" "Is that what you were going to say?" He had the decency to look embarrassed. You know what the difference is between you and the person who offered me this job, Richard? He sees me. He sees who I really am, not how old I am. He values my compassion, my life experience, my character. I stood up, grabbing my purse. If I had stayed with you, I would never have had this opportunity. I never would have realized there is still so much I can do, so much I can be. Sophia, wait. No, I said firmly. You made your decision on Christmas Eve. Now I am making mine. I don't want you back, Richard. I don't want that life back. I want something new, something mine. Don't wait for me. I walked out of the coffee shop without looking back. My hands were shaking, my heart was racing, but I felt powerful. For the first time since Richard had left, I felt in control of my own life. I got into the car and took Matt's card. I dialed the number before I could change my mind. He answered on the second ring. My answer is yes. I accept the position. I could hear the smile in his voice. I am very happy, Sophia. When can you start? Tomorrow? I surprised myself by saying, no point in waiting, right? Tomorrow is perfect. I'll have my assistant send you all the details. Sophia? Yes? Thank you for giving me this opportunity, for believing we can make a difference. No, Matt, I replied. Thank you for reminding me that I still have value, that I can still surprise myself. After hanging up, I sat in the car for a long moment, letting the reality of what I had just done hit me. I had a new job, an important, challenging, terrifying job. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt alive. My first day at Randall Enterprises was pure adrenaline. The company headquarters occupied 15 floors of a glass building in the Chicago Loop. The Randall Foundation was on the top 3 floors, with stunning views of the city. Matt's assistant, an efficient woman named Patricia, met me in the lobby. Mrs. Sophia, welcome. Mr. Randall is in a meeting, but asked me to give you a full tour. I met the foundation team, 10 dedicated people who managed everything from project approval to results monitoring. Everyone was polite, but I could sense the skepticism in their eyes. Who was this 62-year-old woman with no relevant experience who was suddenly being placed in a leadership position? Matt appeared at lunchtime so we could eat in his office while he explained his vision for the foundation. The problem with traditional philanthropy, he said while we ate salads his assistant had ordered, is that it's very distant. People in nice offices deciding what communities need without ever really talking to those communities. I want to change that. I want you to go into the field, visit the projects we fund, see who we are helping, understand what is working and what isn't. And if I discover that a lot of things aren't working, I asked, then we fix it. That is the point, Sophia. I'm not looking for someone to maintain the status quo. I'm looking for someone to challenge, question, and improve everything we do. We spent the next afternoon reviewing the Foundation's current projects. There were food banks, vocational training programs, community centers, housing projects. Each one represented millions of dollars invested, lives potentially transformed. But as I read the reports, I noticed something. They were all very sterile, full of numbers and statistics, but without real stories of real people. No faces, no names, no humanity behind the data. Matt, I said, pointing to a particularly dry report about a training program. Here it says we trained 500 individuals in basic professional skills. But who are these individuals? Did they get jobs afterward? Did their lives actually improve? He looked at the report and then at me, a slow smile forming on his face. That is exactly the right question to ask. And honestly, we don't know. Then let's go find out, I said, with a confidence I didn't know I had. Tomorrow, let's go see that program with our own eyes. And that was what we did. The next day, Matt and I, accompanied only by his driver, went to visit the St. John's Vocational Center, located in one of the roughest parts of the South Side. What we found was revealing. The intention was good, a clean and organized facility with classrooms and equipment. But talking to the instructors and students, we discovered problems no report had mentioned. The courses are good, said Mary, a 35-year-old woman taking a sewing course. But most of us can't get hired afterward. Companies want experience, and we can't get experience without a first job. It's a vicious cycle. Another problem. The center closed at 5 p.m., exactly when many people who needed the courses were getting off their low-wage day jobs. "I would love to take the computer course," explained a young man named Ralph, "but I work 2 jobs to support my family. When can I come?" Matt and I spent 3 hours there, just talking to people, listening to their stories, understanding their realities. And when we left, we had a huge list of things that needed to change. On the ride back, Matt was pensive. "We invested $2 million in that center, and it's helping some people, yes, but it could be helping so many more if we had really understood the community's needs." "So let's change that," I said. "Let's expand the hours. Let's create partnerships with companies to ensure graduates have real job opportunities. Let's make it meaningful." He looked at me with admiration. "You've been here 3 days, and you're already revolutionizing how we do things." "I'm just asking questions," I replied, "and listening to the answers." The following weeks were a whirlwind. We visited every project. We found gaps between intention and real impact everywhere. And in every place, we made changes. In the housing program, we discovered the apartments were built without considering family size. Many had only 1 bedroom, inadequate for larger families. We changed the design. In the community health program, we realized the clinics weren't open when workers could actually visit. We extended hours and added weekend shifts. In a school meal program, we discovered many children arrived hungry because they didn't have breakfast at home. We added a morning meal. Each change seemed small in isolation, but together they were transforming how the Randall Foundation operated, and I was thriving. For the first time in decades, I woke up excited to go to work. My days were full of purpose, of challenges, of the feeling of making a real difference in the world. Richard tried to call me several times in the first few weeks. I ignored most of the calls. When I finally answered, I told him clearly there was nothing to discuss. He had made his choice. The story was over. He tried to argue, say he still loved me, that we could restart, but his words sounded hollow. "How can you love someone you discarded so easily? How can you trust someone who destroyed 40 years in one night?" "Richard," I said finally, "you set me free. Don't you realize? If you hadn't left me, I never would have discovered this. I never would have found this purpose. So thank you sincerely. But no, we are not getting back together. Ever." My children were having mixed reactions to my new life. Paula was proud, encouraging. Jason was worried I was making too many big changes too fast. Andrew was confused by everything. "Mom, you seem different," Paula said during a video call. "You're glowing. You look happy. I haven't seen you like this in years." She was right. When I looked in the mirror now, I saw someone different. I was still 62, still had wrinkles and gray hair, but my eyes shone, my posture was straighter. There was an energy in me that didn't exist before. 3 months after starting at the Randall Foundation, Matt called me to his office for a meeting. When I entered, I found not only him, but also 3 members of the board of Randall Enterprises. My stomach tightened. Had I done something wrong? Had my radical changes upset someone important? "Sophia," Matt started, a mysterious smile on his face. "I would like to formally introduce you to some members of our board. They asked to meet you." An elegant woman stood up and extended her hand. "Dr. Beatrice Garrett, board member and specialist in social development. I have followed your work at the foundation with much interest." "Good interest or bad?" I couldn't help asking. She laughed. "Very good. What you have done in 3 months is remarkable. The effectiveness rate of our programs increased by 40%. And most importantly, we are actually changing lives in a measurable way." The other board members agreed, citing statistics and results that honestly surprised me. I knew I was doing a good job, but I hadn't realized the full impact. "The board is so impressed," Matt continued, "that we would like to propose something. We want to expand our annual budget to $160 million, and we want you to lead that expansion as executive director." Executive director? Of the entire foundation? Not just community relations, but everything? "But Matt," I started. "It's your project. It's our project," he said. "But you have demonstrated a vision and an execution capability that exceed what I could do alone." Sophia, you have transformed not just the foundation, but the way the entire company thinks about social responsibility. I looked at those successful, powerful people offering me a huge responsibility. 6 months ago, I was just Richard's discarded wife. Now, they were offering me the leadership of one of the largest philanthropic institutes in the country. "I need a moment," I whispered. "Excuse me." I went to the restroom and leaned against the sink, looking at my reflection. Shaking hands, racing heart. Was it fear? Was it excitement? Both? I thought of the Sophia from 6 months ago, sitting on that frozen bench, feeling her life had ended. If I could talk to her now, what would I tell her? I would tell her that the end isn't the end. It's just another chapter, that you are capable of much more than you ever imagined. I went back to the meeting room and found everyone waiting anxiously. "Yes," I said simply. "I accept." The room erupted in smiles and handshakes. Matt hugged me quickly, whispering, "I knew you would say yes. You are too brave to turn down a challenge." The following weeks were intense. I formally took over as executive director, which meant not only managing existing programs, but developing new ones. We hired more staff, including young people from the communities we had helped, people who understood from their own experience what the neighborhoods needed. We created a revolutionary pilot program. Instead of simply funding projects, we would create a microcredit fund for small entrepreneurs in underserved communities, with mentoring and support, not just charity. "It's about dignity," I explained in a presentation to the board. "We don't want people to depend on our donations forever. We want to give them the tools to build their own lives." The program was a resounding success. In the first year, we funded 200 small businesses. The success rate was 85%, well above the national average, and every story was inspiring. The seamstress who opened her own shop, the baker who managed to buy professional equipment, the teacher who created a tutoring school. Every success fed me, gave me energy to do more. It was during the launch of our 5th community center unit that something unexpected happened. I was giving a speech to the gathered crowd, talking about the power of second chances, when I noticed a familiar figure at the back of the crowd. Richard. My heart skipped a beat, but I kept speaking. I wasn't going to let his presence destabilize me, not anymore. After the event, while I was talking to community members, he approached. He seemed smaller somehow, older, more tired. "Sophia," he said when we were finally alone, "you were incredible up there." "Thank you," I replied formally. "What are you doing here, Richard?" "I needed to see it for myself. I heard about your work. I read about you in the papers. I couldn't believe you were the same Sophia I knew." "I'm not," I said simply. "That Sophia died on Christmas Eve." "This is someone new." He looked at the ground. "I was an idiot, the biggest idiot in the world. I threw away the best thing I ever had for an empty fantasy." "Yes, you were," I agreed without emotion. "But you know what? I thank you now. If you hadn't left me, I never would have found this." I pointed to the center around us, the smiling people, the children playing in the new park. "I never would have discovered I had this inside me." "Sophia, isn't there any chance?" "No," I interrupted firmly. "There isn't. You made your decision, Richard. And thanks to that decision, I made mine. I am happy now, maybe happier than I ever was. And I'm not going to give this up for someone who discarded me so easily." I saw pain in his eyes, and a part of me felt pity, but it was a small, distant part. "I hope you find what you are looking for," I said gently, "but it won't be with me. That door is closed, Richard, permanently." He nodded slowly, finally understanding there was no way back. "You deserve all the happiness, Sophia. I regret taking so long to realize how special you are." "Me too," I replied. "But at least I realized eventually. That's what matters." Matt appeared at my side as soon as Richard left. "Everything okay?" he asked quietly. "More than okay," I answered with a smile. "That was my past. This here." I pointed to everything around us. "This is my present and my future." 1 year after that fateful Christmas Eve, I was standing at another event. This one very different. It was the official launch of the Randall Microcredit Initiative, now a national program that had helped more than 1,000 small entrepreneurs realize their dreams. The event was being held in the grand ballroom of Randall Enterprises, with hundreds of guests, from important business leaders to beneficiaries of our programs. I was on stage, about to give the opening speech, when I looked at the audience and saw faces representing my journey. My 3 children were in the front row, all smiling proudly. Mary, the seamstress I met at the first center I visited, now owner of her own small factory, was there. Ralph, the young man who wanted to take the computer course but didn't have time, was now a junior programmer at a startup. Dozens of other people whose lives had been touched by our work. And Matt was beside me on stage, not as my boss, but as my partner in this mission. I started speaking, and the words flowed naturally. I spoke about second chances, about how endings can be beginnings in disguise, about it never being too late to discover your purpose. Exactly 1 year ago, I said, I was sitting on a frozen bench, convinced my life was over. I was 62 years old, had just been left by the man with whom I spent 40 years and saw no future before me. But that night I made a simple choice. I saw someone in need and decided to help, even when I myself was suffering. And that simple choice changed everything. I looked at Matt, who was smiling encouragingly. I learned that kindness is not weakness, that compassion is strength, that we are never too old to restart, to grow, to become something new. And I learned that sometimes the worst things that happen to us are just the universe pushing us in the direction we should have been going all along. The audience applauded, but I continued. This foundation, this work we do, isn't about charity. It's about dignity. It's about seeing potential where others see problems. It's about giving people not what we think they need, but the tools so they can build what they know they need. Because I've been there. I've been in the place where you feel discarded, worthless, forgotten. And I know that everything we need sometimes is for someone to see our value when we ourselves cannot see it. When I finished, there was a standing ovation. Tears ran down my face, but they were tears of joy, of fulfillment, of gratitude. After the event, during the reception, a young woman approached. She was about 30, elegantly dressed, and there was something familiar about her face. "Ma'am?" "Sophia," she started nervously. "My name is Jessica." My whole body tensed. Jessica, the 29-year-old waitress Richard had chosen over me. "I know who you are," I said calmly. "I needed to come. I needed to apologize." She looked at the floor. What I did was terrible. I knew he was married, but I convinced myself it didn't matter, that love justified everything. She took a deep breath. But it doesn't justify it. And after I broke up with him, I realized how much I had hurt, not just him, but you. A woman who never did anything bad to me. I looked at her, this woman who had been part of the worst night of my life, and I realized I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel resentment. I felt nothing. She was irrelevant to who I had become. "You are forgiven," I said simply. Jessica blinked, surprised. "Just like that?" "Just like that, because holding on to anger would only hurt me. And because honestly, you did me a favor. If Richard hadn't left me, I never would have found this." I pointed to the room full of people, the work we had built. "So thank you, actually." She seemed confused, but also relieved. "You are a better person than I could ever be." "No," I corrected gently. "I just had to learn some hard lessons about self-worth and purpose. You are still young. You still have time to learn yours." After she left, Matt came over. "Was that Jessica?" he asked. "It was." "And are you okay?" I smiled. "I am more than okay. I am grateful. Without her, without Richard leaving me, I never would have met you. I never would have discovered this version of me." Matt was silent for a moment. "Sophia, there is something I've wanted to ask you for months." "What? Would you have dinner with me?" "Not as colleagues, not as business partners, as something more." My heart raced. Over the months, I had felt a connection growing between us. It wasn't just professional. It was personal, deep, real. "Matt, you are 32. I am 63. People are going to talk. Let them talk, he said intensely. Sophia, you saved me that night in the park, not physically, but spiritually. You showed me that genuine kindness still exists in the world. And in the months since then, watching you work, seeing your heart, your passion, your wisdom, I fell in love. Not with your age, not despite your age, with you, with who you are. Tears filled my eyes again. Yes, I whispered. Yes, I would have dinner with you. He smiled, that warm smile I had learned to adore. How about we start tomorrow night? Tomorrow night would be perfect. While the event continued around us, we stood there for a moment. Two broken people who found each other on the worst night of their lives and helped each other heal, grow, become something new. 2 years later, I would be standing in a beautifully decorated garden, wearing a simple white dress, about to marry Matt. My children would be there, still processing it, but eventually supporting it. Hundreds of people whose lives we touched would be there, and in the place of honor, there would be a framed photo of my old brown coat, the catalyst for everything. But that night, while Matt and I looked at each other amidst the celebration of everything we had built together, I knew only one thing for certain. Sometimes you need to lose everything to discover what really matters. You need to be broken to be remade, stronger. You need to hit the bottom to learn how to fly. I was 62 when my life ended, and 62 when it really began. The Christmas Eve that destroyed my marriage was the same night that gave me my purpose. The coat I gave to a stranger returned to me a future I never dared to dream, and I learned that it is never, ever too late to become who you were born to be. We close this heavy journey not with bitterness, but with clarity. This story, though fictional in form, mirrors the quiet tragedies and redemptions happening in homes across America every day. It reminds us that dignity isn't something given to us by others, it is a boundary we set for ourselves. Love should never require the erasure of who you are, and sometimes the most painful endings are simply the necessary clearing for a new life to begin. Walk with that truth and treat others with the grace you wish to receive.